Hello, I'm Mr. Hall. Welcome to the second of my video guide to medicine through time. This one is going to be on the early Renaissance, and whereas we talked about the overview question for the Middle Ages being about lack of change, here we're talking more about whether the period between 1500 and 1700 saw much change. How much did things improve? Let's find out. So if we go back to the Middle Ages for one moment here, here's an image of a gentleman who's made the catastrophic error of he's dissecting a body in his own home. So you can see he's curious about the body, he's trying to find out, and he's being sort of sternly scolded, if you like, by these two gentlemen on the left of the picture. And this is the point where we're picking up the story, of course, that to dissect was not an accepted part of medicine in the Middle Ages. So if you wanted to find out about the body, there was only one way to do it. You went to university, you learned from your physicians and from your doctors and from your lecturers that Galen's work was right. So this guy has broken the sort of taboo by trying to find out for himself, which is not what the Middle Ages was about, but is what the Renaissance was about. And here's just an image, and we can see this idea that medicine wasn't hands-on in the Middle Ages, but we're going to move in the Renaissance towards a more hands-on, find it out for yourself time period. And so the first gentleman to really make a difference to medicine through time in the Renaissance was Andreas Vesalius. Now, Vesalius was an incredibly curious guy. Rumour has it at the time that he was smaller than most other people, and that possibly led him to be fascinated by the human body, to not want to accept Galen's theories that we're all the same and that everything that he'd done was correct. And so Vesalius' curiosity and his ambition led him to do something rather risky. He wanted to be the personal physician to Emperor Charles V, the most powerful man in Europe. And to do that, he basically would steal bodies from gallows in Paris. So you could imagine these sort of nights where a young man would just come skulking out from the shadows and jump and sort of tear limbs and tear bits of body off of rotting criminals on the gibbet. And he would take them home, he would boil them down, he would piece the bones together, he would piece the organs and try and figure out which organ went where, and blood vessels and skin, and this obviously takes incredible bravery, but also incredible genius. Most of us couldn't do this, wouldn't know where to start. But this leads him to produce one of the sort of monumental books of the time period. So here we see an iconic image from Vesalius' seminal book, his 1543 On the Fabric of the Human Body, or Fabrica, as we often refer to it. And it really was earth-shattering. This was something that hadn't been done before. You could actually see the different layers. You could actually lift up different layers of the book and sort of pick up like a pop-up book and see the layers underneath. And he corrected, most importantly for us, he corrected 200 mistakes that Galen had made, from simple ones about the kidneys. Galen had said the right kidney was higher than the left, which wasn't true. Galen had said that there were two bones in the jaw. Absolutely just not true. And also that there were no holes in the septum for blood to get from one side to the other. Now Galen's, Vesalius' book, unfortunately, isn't a medical book. It wasn't designed as a medical text. It was more of a roadmap and more of a look how clever I am. But nevertheless, it was, a monumental piece. Anatomy of the human body was now understood in a way that we'd never understood before, and importantly, this book was copied up into English, and a book called Compendium was available in Britain, where you could see and access the works of Vesalius. Now, if we move on to not just the way the body looked, but the way the body worked, here we've got an image from Galen's work again. So again, we're going pre-Renaissance, going back into the ancient world, into the Middle Ages. This is what they believed about the heart. Now, generally speaking, Galen had said that the heart generated blood along with the liver, and that the body used it up. It consumed it like a car consumes petrol. And because of that, of course, they believed that the body could have too much blood, which might need to be drained off through bleeding, or it might have not enough, and we might need to eat certain foods like steaks and red meat to produce more blood. So our beliefs before the Renaissance was that the heart was a generator of blood, but not much else really. But if we move on, by 1628, William Harvey publishes his circulation theory. Now, Harvey had waited quite a long time. He'd faced years of criticism, but he dared to produce this idea that actually blood circulates around the body. It's the same blood being oxidized in the lungs and then being pumped around the body. So the discovery here, if you like, is that the heart is a pump. It propels the blood around the body, through the arteries and back through the veins. Unfortunately, he couldn't see capillaries, which was a problem for him in convincing people that his work was correct. But this was, he could calculate how much blood you had, and he would go around doing vivisections where he would actually sort of operate live on lizards where you could see it happening very slowly. Now, again, this sounds an incredible piece of work, but he suffered an awful lot of blowback from many people who said, you know what, to believe the heart is a pump, I have to reject the work of Galen, because Galen had said I can have too much blood or not enough. And of course, William Harvey is saying, well, no, you can have, it's the same amount of blood. See, to believe Harvey, you had to reject the theory of the four humours. And this led to many doctors at the time really doing nothing with the work of Harvey, and Vesalius to that matter. So we like to use this phrase, the works of Harvey and Vesalius had little practical application at the time. However, we do need to think about why there were so many changes in the Renaissance, in the same way that we wanted to explain why there weren't any changes in the Middle Ages, and we explained how attitudes were very traditional. The church played a big role in holding medicine back. This time we've got the roles, we've already talked about the roles of individuals like Harvey and Vesalius in their own personal genius, and we've alluded to attitudes changing. We'll talk about that more in a separate video. But we've also got the roles of the institutions, in this case the king. The king, both King Charles I and II actually play an inadvertent role in propelling medicine forward in the Renaissance. In this case, William Harvey was the royal physician to Charles I. So when he published his work, it gave him some protection, because to criticise William Harvey was, of course, to criticise the king, which wasn't allowed. But the biggest argument, or the biggest sort of shift in the Renaissance, was technology. And that particular piece of technology that propels us through into this next period of medical rejuvenation is the printing press. We think the printing press was brought to England sometime in the mid-15th century by a guy called William Caxton. It had been invented in Germany. And the printing press was a catalyst for change. It enabled anybody to go, with the right amount of money, of course, to go to a printing firm. You can see in the image here, it's a business, and they would sort of produce several hundred copies of your book. You didn't have to go through the church, so you didn't have to get their permission, so you could challenge the church's ideas, as of course the works of Harvey and Vesalius did. You could also get it produced on a much wider scale, so you could get this knowledge disseminated throughout Europe, like hitting share on a Facebook page. So Harvey and Vesalius, and later a guy called Thomas Sydenham, were able to have their work seen by a wider audience. So the printing press is an absolute game changer. The power of the printing press provides the power for many ordinary authors who had an idea about anything. I mean, it was originally made just for Bibles, but the fact that Vesalius travels across the Alps to Swiss printers shows you how important the printing press was, particularly for Vesalius and Harvey, and also recreating their diagrams that were so important to getting their ideas across. So as a final finish for today, here we've got a 4-mark question that might just bring some of these ideas together. We've got to explain one way in which the ideas about the human body in the Middle Ages were different to ideas about the body in the Renaissance. Now, this is your classic comparing time periods question. And for this question, we need to be careful. When we see one way, that is what we need to explain. Just one way something changed. And in this case, we need to focus on ideas about the human body. So we're not talking about theories of illness, not talking about treatment. We're talking about knowledge of anatomy, really, in this question. And do just be aware, this question says different. Sometimes it does say similar. So all we need to do for this question is identify a difference. And in this particular case, we'd start off and tell the examiner in the Middle Ages. And in this case, we're talking about the idea that knowledge of the body was based on Galen, and that Galen had dissected pigs and monkeys and apes back in the 2nd century AD. And so because of that, his knowledge was often incorrect, but it was unchallenged because of the church. All it is 2 marks there. And then we use a discourse marker, sort of however, or a whereas, or on the other hand, during the Renaissance. And I think because we're talking about knowledge of the human body, it's only right that Harvey and or Vesalius are our guys here, so we would discuss them and what they did and found out, and maybe just the idea to get this 4th mark, some supporting knowledge. So we might say something like, however, during the Renaissance, William Harvey discovered the heart was a pump. He also said that blood circulated around the body, which was different to Galen's ideas about it being consumed. So it's a nice, simple question, provided we know what to do. And the idea is a simple comparison of a key idea across time. Thank you so much for listening to this guide. Tune in for my next one, where we will discuss later Renaissance activity, the age of science, with Thomas Sydenham and the Royal Society.